Hi, everyone. Welcome to Maynard Solutions Connect Symposium. Thank you for attending the GP 101 session today. I will be your host, Caitlin Watts, and your presenter today will be Jessica Myers. She has been a GP and expert consultant for over 10 years. At this time, I will hand over the control to Jessica, and she will get started. Well, Jessica, take it from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate. Well, welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about GP 101. It entails discussing navigation, hosting setups, and important tools that are available that maybe you don't remember or haven't used very often. A little bit about me. I've been working in GP, like Kate said, for about 10 years. First, I was an end user, and then I transitioned to a consultant. When I first started working in GP, there was a lot to learn. There are a lot of screens, a lot of ways to navigate. Some of what you will learn today will be very basic for everyone, but there will be great tools to add to your procedures or pass on to other employees. So let's begin. Right now, we are taking the basics to new heights. We're going to start with an overview. And here's our basic. When you log into GP, you have the company, unless you have just one company, and then you also see a user ID and current users, which are the number of users allowed in your system at one time. If you ever need to change companies within GP, you can click at the bottom of the left screen of GP and change the company where it says, for example, right here, Fabricam Incorporated. You also see SA, which is my user, and then you also see the date. So if you click on that company, Fabricam, it'll take you back to the main screen, or when you click on the user ID, it'll take you back to the login screen to change users. The user date, if you click on the user date, you will also be able to change the user date. Now it defaults to the system date, which is usually the date that's on your very bottom computer screen. However, sometimes people change this date if they're making entries for a prior period or a future period that are going to be consistently one date. When you first log into GP, you have a home screen. This is what your home screen normally looks like. However, if you've recently upgraded to the newest GP or a GP 2018, it may default to something called Business Central. Now, if you want to get your home screen back, if you click over here under Customize this page, you can change it back to the normal GP default. The best thing about the home screen is it's a snapshot of everything that you could possibly do in your job. You have your home up here, which could have keyboard shortcuts or shortcuts to Windows. You can have a to-do box that tells you all your reminders of basically open purchase orders, open invoices, things that are based on SMARTLISTs. You also have tasks, which you could create. A lot of accountants use tasks to create your checklist, your monthly checklist, your annual checklist. You can assign it to users, anything to help with your accounting processes. You can have little screens like this one that shows a procurement, which is based on workflow. You could also have your reports that you constantly use. And you can have quick links like you see here, which are quick links to screens, to reports, to websites. The reminders. People use reminders to set up queues on your home screen, like I was saying before. When you log in, it is based on a set of conditions, normally based on SMARTLISTs, such as it tells you the overdue invoices, recurring batches to post, and it allows you to then remember to go out and take care of those items. To set up reminders, there are predefined reminders like you see here. These over here are predefined based on what is in the system, based on the SMARTLIST in the system already. You can also create custom reminders, as you see down here at the bottom. And they're very easy to create. So to use those predefined reminders, on your home screen, you click the Renew Reminder button. You can also access it by going to Home and then User Preferences. For the predefined, you just check the checkbox where it says Remind Me, and then you enter the number of days. And then you click Display as Queue if you want to have it automatically pop up when you log into GP. For the custom reminders, you click on at the very bottom of this prior screen, you click on New. And once you click on New, you then choose the SMARTLIST favorite that you want to base it on. So you could create custom SMARTLIST favorites out there and then use that to create your custom reminder. Now you can base it on number of records or a total of a column. So it's a little limited in what you can base it on, but it is a great tool to have out there if you're trying to remember when something goes over or under a certain item. For tasks, these, like I was referring to before, they're a lot like reminders, but the difference is you are reminding yourself to complete a step in a process. For example, on your monthly, quarterly, or yearly checklist, you could assign setup tasks within GP and assign it to a user or to yourself. Once the user completes the task, you will see their name and the date that they completed that task. You can put a due date like you see here, and then you will notice the status. Now you can set them to recurring, or they could be a one-time item. Going on to our navigation pane. Now when you log into GP, you see, or it lands on the home navigation pane. You also have all these navigation panes down here. A lot of people live on the financial or purchasing if you are mainly payables. If you're a salesperson, you go to sales. If you maintain inventory, you go to inventory, and so on. Now you can customize which navigation panes you see. You can also use this little bar right here to pull up and see all the available navigation pane options. If you click at the very bottom of the navigation pane down here, where you see the little guy, there's these two little arrows. If you click on these two little arrows right here, what's going to happen is you're able to configure it for yourself. So you could add Windows SMARTLIST macros to your home landing page, or you could remove what you're seeing, such as you don't do administration, you can remove that if you see it, or you don't do purchasing, you can remove those. Or you can change the order of them. So if you click on, for example, financial, and then click on the move down, it will move that down in that order. Once you have it the way you like it, you click OK, and it will save that for your specific user. Going on to navigation lists. So as I was saying before, navigation pane are all the listed items right here that say the home, financial, sales. Navigation lists are located on the module itself. So for example, it is on the purchasing module right now, or the purchasing navigation pane. And as you can see here, it's clicked on this area called vendors. Now this is going to list our master records, or payables transactions will list our transactional information. And then you also have lists. So you have smart lists, you can have Excel reports, you can have SSRS or SQL Reporting Services reports. Those are the navigation lists. Normally, when you click on a navigation pane, it'll default to this very top one on each module, which will be the snapshot of everything you could do in that module. Now going on to our Microsoft Dynamics GP menu at the top. So looking in GP, When we talk about the Microsoft Dynamics GP, this little drop down right here is Microsoft Dynamics GP. It gives you options such as editing, which allows you to see what you can copy and paste onto different screens. You also see that there's user and company. So if you didn't want to click on the user company or the user date at the very bottom of GP, you can click on it here. There's going to be tools that we're going to be discussing, such as batch recovery. Maintenance, we're not going to really touch on. That is more the admin functions, such as running check links or updating your payroll tables. You also see on this drop-down, Smart Lists. That is where it will open up your Smart List window, so then you can choose Smart Lists to take advantage of. You can also see our reminders, our tasks list, and there's also this big thing right here that we're going to talk about in a few, about the process monitor. You also see user preferences. Now the user preferences are for your specific user. So if you want to change the colors of what you're seeing for your hyperlinks, or you want to change bold red so you can see the required fields, you can do that also, but it's for your specific user only. Process monitor. This is a big thing that people need to remember to go check if their GP appears to be stuck. The process monitor will list all the processes that are running right in that time in your current session. Sometimes when you run an age trial balance and it's not popping up immediately, you wonder why. And you wonder if you've clicked it 4, 5, or 20 times. And the process monitor will show you whether it's trying to run the report or what processes are preventing it from running. Now, sometimes when people forget to log out of GP, there are processes running from the prior day, preventing other things from opening. When that happens, we help you to then end the task and get back into GP. The user preferences, like I was referring to before, are specific to your user. They allow you to modify your individual preferences. For example, you can have your entry key be a tab, which is the default, or return. Now, some people from DOS systems are used to using return to tab through the fields. So you could change that to return, and then when you're going on a screen or when you're on an actual screen, you can use your return key to return through those fields, to tab through them. The window command display, this is something that many people who have had prior versions of GP will know that there used to be a file menu structure. Whereas now, as you can see here, it's more of an action pane or a ribbon, which is very consistent with other Microsoft products such as Excel or Word or any of the other Microsoft items out there. If you use sales processing, you can default the sales document type from invoice or quote or orders. You can also see here, we were talking about reminders are listed here also. Going back to, as I was talking about before, the window command display. Many people who are on GP, who've been on GP on the most recent versions of GP, at least since 2013, is they're used to the action pane versus the menu bar, which is what this bottom one is. This is what it used to look like prior to 2013 when they started putting the action pane in there. Sometimes with third parties, we have to change it to the action pane strip or the menu bar just because of how their code is written. But generally now, more recently or more in the past few years, they have been changing their code to go with the action pane that is listed here. The next item we're going to talk about are fiscal period setup. Fiscal period setup is a very important thing that people don't think about, or they think about once a year. This is where, when it becomes the end of your year, you need to make sure you come out to this screen under Admin, Setup, Company, Fiscal Periods to create your new fiscal year. And When people don't do that, they usually get an error message when they try to post a transaction or try to close the year that they can't close it because the period isn't set up. This window is also wonderful to come into every month, at least we recommend it when you're running financials, right? When you've closed the month, it's great to come into this window and click your little checkbox to each module. That way, people can't post to your published financial statements so that it changes those values. And when you click the checkbox, it's called a soft close. It's not officially closed. You can come back into the screen at any point in time and unselect it and post something. But it prevents people from posting to your published financials so that nothing gets changed. So our fiscal period setup, as you can see here, I have a couple of check boxes here, which is very simple to click. So you just click on the little checkbox and then that period is closed for that time. Another big area where people need to get into, which some have access and others don't, is batch recovery. So under administration, routines, batch recovery, this is how we or yourself can go in and recover a particular batch. The batch recovery window allows you to process interrupted batches or see what happened to those errors. Sometimes there are issues where you cannot recover a batch, and we have to help you get into the back end and recover it for you. But generally, you can come to this batch recovery window and recover the batch, go to the module in which you were posting it, and print your posting journal to see what happened. And then you can finish the process. Here are, on this handout that you will be receiving, are some common recovery statuses and what needs to happen. So for example, transaction error edit required. There was an interruption during your transaction process, which could be a missing account value. The fiscal period was marked as closed. It could have not been created. There are many common things that happen with the transaction error edit required, which are very easy for people to then review and fix on their own. Some of the harder ones to do are check printing interrupted or posting interrupted, journal printing interrupted. A lot of times with those, if you click continue and it just stays in that batch recovery window, we at Mainer have to go into your back end of the system and open that batch back up so then you can process it and finish what you were trying to accomplish. Shortcuts. There are many shortcuts you can use. They allow you to open frequently used windows and resources, which for some users who, especially who are new, if they don't know where to get to certain areas, it allows them to just add it to their home screen and navigate to that area. It's very easy to add a shortcut, especially when you're on a window. You just go to File, then Add to your shortcuts, and it'll be available on your home screen at any point in time. When you open the shortcut, you just click on it and it opens up the window or report that you just saved. There are keyboard shortcuts which are helpful. If you love to work on your keyboard and go with your keyboard as opposed to just going to the screen, you can type Alt-H, for example, to open up the help menu, or Alt-C to open up the card menu on your main toolbar. I have also included in the next slide all of the possible keyboard shortcuts available currently. For example, if you hit Control plus the 1 number, it'll take you back to your home navigation pane. Or Control Print to go ahead and print. Alt-X, which is great, it automatically closes your GP. Talking about date entry, as I was referencing before, usually your date entry defaults to your computer system date. Sometimes you can, like I was saying before, if you have a massive amount of entries to enter for a certain time period that has passed, you can change that date at the very bottom of GP, and it will then translate into the transaction entry window. There's a couple of great things about the date entry is that you don't have to enter the slashes. You can just type, for example, the month and the year, or just enter the date, or use your plus and minus keys to go back one day or up one day. There are many ways that you can use the date entry that you don't have to key in the slashes to get the right date in there. Also, which is kind of it's been this way for quite a few years now, but when you click on the date, you can use your mouse to drill out. So for example, if I clicked on April 27 or the April 2027, it'll then take me out to 27, and then I can choose the month I want. Or if I click on the 2027, I can then choose the year that I want to go to. And then again, if you click on the 2020 to 2029, you can then choose the date, the year range you want to select. Now, talking about our AR, AP, sales orders, purchase orders, dates, and more. When you are looking at your different transactions, the document date on a lot of your entry windows is the subledger date. For most companies, it is going to be the actual date of your invoice that you receive from your vendors or customers. In your bank reconciliation window, or rather your bank transaction window, it's going to be your transaction date. So think of when you're looking at the screens, the document dates are going to be the subledger dates, not necessarily your posting dates. Posting dates, or your GL posting date, is a date that it will post to your general ledger. So for example, you could have a document date of 1/1/2020, but you want it to be posted 12/31/2019. You can have those two different dates if you really wanted to. When you click in the AR module, so when in the accounts receivable module, the applying date could be a different date also. Even with your AP, you could have a different apply date. So when you're looking at all the different dates, they may not correspond specifically. It's very important when you're doing applying to make sure that your system date is the date you want it to be reflected. So for example, if we go into GP and look at purchasing here, our transaction entry window, we see our document date is 4/12/2027, which corresponds to my 4/12/2027 at the bottom of my GP. If I click that blue arrow next to my document date here, I can see my posting date. Now this posting date, as we were talking about, could be changed to 04/30/2027. And then my document date would be the 12th, but I want it to be reflected in my general ledger as of 4/30. When we talk about batches in a few minutes here, the posting date could be different based on the batch date. So talking about posting. Normally, you have one posting date, or a lot of people like to have the same posting date on the document, as the document date is the same as the GL posting date. Sometimes that's not always the case. When we look at our posting setup, this is very important for everyone who's new to how GP works to determine when an item is posted through to the GL with a specific date and when it's not posted to the GL. This setup here, which is usually done by an administration type person, has a couple of key areas. You see there's something called post to the general ledger, which just creates a batch to be posted to the general ledger. Post through the general ledger automatically posts all the way through to the general ledger. Sometimes people like to review the batches before they're posted to the general ledger and like to change the date of that batch before they post it. Allow transaction posting here allows you to post a specific transaction to the module. Sometimes people like to prevent transaction posting. For example, general ledger. If you're trying to make people have it approved by a batch, you turn off this allow transaction posting so that you make people save their general ledger transaction to a batch to then be reviewed and approved and then posted. Now, when allow transaction posting is selected, you're just allowing the people to post the transactions without a batch. It's recommended that you should probably have people post it to a batch because it's a lot easier to recover. And it allows you to then track who, what day, and what person posted the batch. A lot of times we'll have people use the person's initials and date so that you know who created that batch to be posted. This is also where you can unselect reports to print. So as you see here, these are all the reports that are being selected to print. You can change it so that you're asked or it just automatically prints, or you can print it to a file. And if you don't want it to print, you just unselect this checkbox next to the report. A big thing to remember is that when you're on a series, a specific module, you should change the origin to the transaction you want to look at. For example, going back into GP here, if we go to Dynamics GP, Tools, Setup, Posting, Posting, and we choose the financial series. We then change the origin to be our general entry window. We want to unselect allow transaction posting because we want to require people to save it to a batch first. And then we don't want to print the posting journal because, as everyone knows, you can always reprint your posting journal at any point in time. You can also require a batch approval, which will make people have to have their batches reviewed by their supervisor or by their person who is supposed to be reviewing before it's posted. It's a nice free feature that's always in GP that you can use on any of the areas. So if we look at sales transaction entry, you can also require a batch approval here also. So it is something that if you are trying to work on your internal controls, you can require batch approval, and it's already built into GP. You could also verify the number of transactions and verify batch amounts, which isn't normally common, but some people can use it to also put in additional internal controls. The types of posting, as we were discussing, was transactional posting, which allows the transaction to be posted and doesn't require you to save it to a batch. Batch posting, the transactions are grouped in a batch and can be posted simultaneously, and it's useful when you're trying to enter for different periods so that you're not having to constantly change the posting date on a specific transaction. And you save them all to one batch to be posted to one batch. People talk about series post and master posting, which is a way to post the transactions in a mass situation. So a lot of times people will post their batches individually, or if you are on a specific series, a specific navigation pane, you can post all those batches. Master posts allows you to post batches throughout the entire system, which I don't really recommend because you don't necessarily know which ones should be posted or shouldn't be posted. So batch versus transaction posting. Posting by batch, as we were saying before, is usually preferred. It's a way users can enter transactions and run an edit list to review and look for errors, which helps prevent it going to batch recovery and helps you to make sure that you put the right period date in or that you have the correct accounts listed with the transaction. It provides a better audit trail. So when you're looking in at SMARTLIST or any other reports, you can look and see what batch was used to post. And then you could also figure out, even if the person is no longer there, you could see who it was related to and what day they did it. Many companies use that batch ID as another field to filter and search on with SMARTLIST or any other reports. And if you have a lot of AP users, which not everyone has more than one person in accounts payable, but if you do, it's nice to be able to have them use their initials and the date that they performed the batch. Talking about posting account setup. Posting account setups, a lot of people don't really think about, or they wonder when they're trying to perform a transaction why the default account didn't process. There's something called posting account setups, which can be global. So what we're referring to on this screen are the global posting accounts. And on this area, under Administration, Posting Accounts, these will default if you don't have a specific account on an item or a customer or a vendor card. It allows the transactions to process without needing to remember to go to the card of the customer or item or vendor so that there are no errors. There are also payroll posting accounts, which if we go back into GP here, you'll see tools, setup, posting accounts, and then you'll see payroll accounts. For those who do use payroll, the payroll accounts are important when you're adding a new code. For example, you added a new department code, or you added a new position, or a new pay code, or even a new benefit or state or local code. Those are housed here under payroll posting accounts. For all the other users who don't use payroll, the default posting account setup is always going to be found under posting accounts. These have your basics, your financial, your sales, your purchasing or payables, your inventory, and if you use project accounting, the project module. These are nice ways to prevent people from forgetting to put a transaction in or putting a default in the system. Now you can add, as I was referring to, posting accounts in the modules. So if you want a specific vendor to post to a specific purchasing account or a different accounts payable account than your default one, you can set it up on the master record itself. If you don't enter a default posting account for the master record, it will default from your posting account setup. Or if you have no accounts set up anywhere, it's just going to be blank. And then you'll have to recover that transaction from the batch. Even though the default does post in or populate into the transaction, you can change it at any point in time before posting. there is a nice feature that not everyone knows about, that, for example, on this vendor, you could create a default account, and then you could click the arrow next to it and add additional accounts to be available in the lookup. That way, when you're on that transaction or you have a temporary person entering the transactions, they can look and see what are available for that particular vendor. And they don't have to scroll through all of the accounts available. Talking about our inquiry screens. So moving on from our posting accounts or posting setup, basic information about that area, we're going to talk about our inquiry screens. Inquiry screens, there's an important thing when people are entering accounts. If you look at an account card, if you have access, you'll maybe wonder about this include and lookup area. This allows you to remove, for example, you don't want the cash account to be located in the inventory control to be looked up for a transaction. You could unselect that under that item for inventory control, or you don't want it to be in purchasing or payroll. The account card is where it tells you where it's available to be reviewed or to be used in the system. In a lot of the areas, there are lookups with advanced lookups. So you can, for example, go to a vendor card, which is on our next screen here. This is what an advanced lookup looks like. You can have your default vendor ID, the vendor name, but there's something called the additional sorts. And you can create this or you can click on this by custom sort area to create advanced lookups to choose your advanced lookup area. Sometimes people have a specific thing they are trying to use the custom sort for. For example, they always want to sort by state or by city. You can use the advanced lookups to have that quick way of sorting by those advanced areas. In some of your inquiry windows, you can set up as your default view to sort. So for example, you want to sort by state always. And sometimes you'll see this option to set as your default. Other times you won't see that, which means you can't save that as your default view. Transaction inquiry windows are available on all the modules. A lot of the big ones are to sort by your specific transaction, by your vendor or your customer. This allows you to see that one vendor or one customer, whereas if you look at the document ones, so if we go into GP here, here's our inquiry for vendors, for example. You have transaction by vendor and transaction by document. A lot of times the transaction by document gives you way more information than you could possibly want to see. And it may take longer for it to populate the data. The transaction by vendor allows you to really distinguish the vendor you're searching for or even customers that you're searching for. For the document number, you can sort by the document date, which would be helpful. But if you know the vendor, it's very helpful to go to the specific inquiry card that specifies the vendor or the customer. There are inquiry windows under the financial also that are very important. If you came from or before 2013, they used to have the historical summary and the summary window. Since 2013, it's been put into one card where you get to check the year and see that whether it's 2021, like here you see it says history, whereas before, if it's an open year, it doesn't have history listed there. So prior to this current version, prior to 2013, it used to be split out between two separate inquiry windows. Other ways of inquiring about data are SMARTLISTs. SMARTLISTs, as I talked about before, is located under Microsoft Dynamics GP. To Tools, to set up to System SMARTLIST options, so you can see that. Or if you click on, like we were talking about before, Microsoft Dynamics GP down to SMARTLISTs. And that opens up your SMARTLISTs that are already pre-built into the system. It allows you to search and filter quickly and easily through those transactions that are available, other than just going to the inquiry windows. It allows you to create custom reports that you can export out to Excel, which is very helpful, for example, with around the time for audits. A lot of times people or auditors will look for specific transactions, or even if you're trying to perform bank reconciliations, it's a nice way to filter and see which transactions are listed as voided or unreconciled. So then you can easily export that out to Excel, review and see which ones need to be selected, and then move on from there. Now, the nice little tip and tool here is that you can change, if we go to the next slide, and you notice that the maximum records down here for this particular SMARTLIST is set at over 1 million or 1 billion. Normally, this is only set at a maximum of 1,000. And if we go to the options, we can also set up different parameters where it doesn't default to, that goes beyond the maximum of 1,000 records. So if we go to our tools setup here, system, and then SMARTLIST options, this is where we can change it from that maximum records of 1,000 to whatever we want it to be. And that can be our default. And we can click OK, and it will change that for our accounts. Now going to the next slide here, people who aren't very familiar with SMARTLISTs, there are the search button feature. So if we go into SMARTLIST here, as you can see, you have all your folders here, which are your modules or access that you have, modules that you have access to. If we look at our financial and we click our little expansion button where this plus was, it'll give us more options. There are account transactions, which allow you to focus on a specific area. You have your accounts, which allow you to review all your GL accounts available. You have your bank transactions, which there's only one asterisk, which is our star, which is our default in there. But if you click on the asterisk one, the star one, this is our default CAN GP report. If we click on search at the top here, we can add filters or columns that allow us to filter our data to what we're trying to look for. For example, if we click our magnifying glass next to the column, it'll default to showing only selected columns. If we click our drop down and choose all columns, what this does is it opens it up to show us all those columns available for this particular SMARTLIST and module. A warning for anyone out there that if you click this any field and try to use that one, it doesn't always work out very well because it's trying to search any field that contains that particular item you're looking for. So if you choose any field, it may take quite a while for the report to populate. Now, if we choose back to select the columns here and we say our GL posting date as our column, you then have our filters, which is equal to, contains, begins with, is between, And then you can choose to enter a particular date to say when you want to run this report. This is helpful when you're using them for reminders or tasks or items like that. If we enter a particular date, so 04/01/2020 through 04/30/2020, we then have set our GL posting date as our parameter to search on. Now you have 3 additional columns that you could filter even more onto. And we can change our maximum records here for more records if you really wanted to. But once you've set all your search terms here, you can click OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to go and look for that particular transaction, all those filters you put on the smart list. And if you notice at the very bottom of this window that it says there were 0 bank transactions found and that it was completed, and this is what if we click on this, it'll open them back up our search box. Now, if this is a smart list we want to save, notice at the top there's nothing called save. And even if you click on file, you don't see something that says file save as. If you're wanting to save this particular report, you have to click on favorites and then name it what you want to call it. And you have the option to make this visible to the system, to the company, or to a specific user. You can also assign a password to it. Once you click this button here, add, you can then add a favorite or add a favorite and a reminder. If I click add favorite here, it's going to then, if we expand this back out, create a new smart list option listed here. If you made changes to this particular smart list, well, you always have to go back to your favorites button here and then click modify. So instead of add favorite, you click on this that says modify here. If you're needing to export this out, you can click on the Excel button at the very top here, or you can export it out to Word. Most people like to export it to Excel because then they can create their pivot tables or send it off to their auditors like they need to. Going back to our PowerPoint here, this is talking about our search account, search button that we talked about, our adding and saving of it here. And then you can also change the column display if you wanted to, or you can leave it as is and then export it to Excel and then change the columns at that time. A couple of key things to think of is that you can use wildcards. So instead of using that any field, you can choose, for example, the vendor name and then say that it begins with A, B, C, or D, and it'll only pull those particular vendors that begin with that. You can also use the caret, such as this right here under value. That'll then also have the city where it does not begin with that C. As you see here, the smart list can be exported to Excel just by clicking that Excel button. And we talked about our smart list options where you could change it for a particular category, which means that particular smart list folder. Something that people had come up in 2013 and beyond is the copy paste feature, which is fantastic for everyone who's entering general ledger journal entries. The wonderful thing about it is that you can maintain all of your, instead of creating quick entries or recurring postings, you can save them out to Excel and then just copy and paste it into your journal entry window. The Excel file has to be the description if you want to have one, the account, your debit, and your credit. And how it works is you highlight those 4 cells, come into your journal entry transaction window, and click paste. What GP doesn't have is they only have it on the general ledger distributions. Now there is a third-party tool that you can easily attach to your GP system, in which you can also use it in your payables and your sales distributions. Now, sales distributions doesn't include sales order processing because those are based on inventory general ledgers. But you can create it on your receivables transaction entry window. And what's great is, again, you just have to highlight those few cells along with all of the distributions you're trying to hit and paste it into your payables or your receivables entry window or distributions. So it is one nice thing that if you guys do enter quite a few transactions or quite a few distributions for payables or receivables, it's an add-on tool that we can attach to your system to make it a lot easier for your users so they're not hand keying all those distributions over again. In addition to copying and pasting distributions, when you're creating a new user, you can copy user settings, which makes it quite nice when someone replaces someone because they've retired or because they've moved on to a new organization. You can create their user ID by entering their user ID, entering their name, entering a password, and then clicking copy settings. And what you can do is you can copy the settings from that particular user they replace, along with their homepage roles, content, and area pages, so that they have what that prior user used, which makes the transition even smoother so that you're not having to provide the prior user's password so that that user uses it. Moving on to our wonderful, helpful tools that are available. A lot of people don't remember or don't think to look, or maybe they don't have access to, but if you're trying to maintain your vendors and customer lists and you have a temp, for example, or you started in the organization later and they've had 5 different vendors that's the same vendor, but created their ID several different times. Same with the customers. They had one customer listed this way and then another person entered that same customer a different way and entered a transaction. The vendor combiner modifier, as well as the customer combiner modifier, allows you to combine vendors or combine customers without losing that transactional data. It allows you to basically take one or all of the different customer or vendor IDs and combine it into the one, and moves the transaction from all of those different customers or vendors into the correct vendor or customer that you want to use and maintain going forward. You can also use the modifier to change how you want to list your customers. So for example, if you converted from another system, or it was just the convention that they used before, that they used numberings. So 1, 2, 3, 4 versus the customer name and then a number or something to that degree. You can use the modifier and modify all the customers or all the vendors to create a new way you want to maintain your vendors. What's more meaningful for your current users. As we referenced before, you can always reprint your journals. So each module has the ability to reprint your postings journal. So when the auditor asks for a reprint of the journal and you forgot to print it, or you just chose not to because you are trying to be paperless, you can always go back and reprint that journal to provide to the auditors. PSTL, which is referenced by a lot of consultants, is called Professional Service Tools. These are a group of tools that really help a lot of people. There are system-specific tools. As you can see here, there's the financial tools, which has the account modifier combiner, which works all very similar to the account or to the vendor and customer combiner modifier. You also have checkbook modifier, which allows you to change the way the checkbook is named. So for example, you have two operating accounts, one with National Bank or National City, which used to be PNC. So you have it called National City Operating or NC Operating. Well, they converted, or they are now PNC. So you could use that checkbook modifier to change it from National City to PNC. Or you could change it to the bank account number. Whatever's meaningful for you, you could change the checkbook ID to be that name. A couple of other big ones that people use are the RM transaction apply, which we're about to talk about, the document date verify, which prevents people from posting to another period, and the update user date is one that a lot of people use also. The RM unapply is a tool that after you've performed that remove transactions in sales will allow you to go and unapply and move the transaction back to open so you can correctly apply it to the documents that they were supposed to be applied to. This tool is very helpful in a lot of situations. I've had to use it for different customers at different times, but it helps to clear up your aging and put the correct application to the correct transactions. The document date verify, as you can see here, all you have to do is select that little checkbox, and what it does is it prevents users from posting transactions to dates that don't exist by enabling the doc date verify. So even if you didn't create a fiscal period, for example, 11/20 of 2020 or 11/20 of 2021, but your batch posting is 3/31 of 2020, GP will still allow you to post that transaction, even though the date is far in the future. What this doc date verify prevents is users from entering invoice dates that are beyond the current fiscal period. Now, if you're using a third-party system, for example, RecLogic, and it's importing or processing over, this document date verify doesn't prevent that. We have to change a couple of coding in the background to prevent it from happening. But that's because it's a third party and it's bypassing the standard GP logic. Now, what happens is people will see you cannot post to a date not within the closed period. Are you sure you want to continue? And it will prevent people from using that date. And this is a system setting, so once it's enabled for everyone. The update user date is something a lot of people use if they're tired. For example, they forget to log out of the system and they don't want to have all those messages in their process monitor of forgetting to process to the next, do you want to update to the next date? What this update user date performs is it automatically pushes it forward to the next date. So you don't get that pop-up of it became midnight and you forgot, and do you want to change the user date? This automatically does it for you. The shortcut copy. So this is a tool that's very useful if you're trying to copy from one user to another. So for example, if the home page copy didn't work, this will allow you to copy shortcuts from another user to a new user or to an existing user. It's very helpful, especially when you're using macros. So if you haven't used any macros or the prior person did, this will allow you to quickly and easily copy it without recreating everything out there. And finally, another big one is the default add item pop to SOP. And what this does is it automatically adds the item selection in the options for your sales transaction entry, purchase order transaction entry, receivings transaction, and purchasing invoice entry. As you can see here, it creates a little options area and allows you to add the item easily without having to go to inventory and then perform that control in that regard. At this point, we've reached the end of the PowerPoint, but if anyone has any questions or want to see any additional areas that we haven't covered, we'll be happy to at this time.
Oh, here we go. Can you please review how to end a process that is hung up and not allowing to exit from GP?
So if you look at your process monitor, and there are tons of processes sitting out here, what usually happens is that even if you click suspend, it won't allow you to GP. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to right click on your taskbar, task manager, find GP, so right here, and click end task. And what happens is it ends the task. And then you have to relaunch GP, log back in, and what happens is you're prompted that your user is already logged into a particular company. Do you want to review? And you say yes. And then you delete your user. And then you're able to log back in. Now, sometimes when there's hung processes, for example, you're processing checks or something like that, or even receivables, it will tell you when you log back into GP that postings were interrupted or processes were interrupted, and it will allow you then to go and recover your batch or go back to the module in which you were processing and finish processing that batch.
At this point, I think we are good. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us and giving us this awesome presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. Thank you and have a great day.